The iron gates of the Belmont estate groaned open like the maw of a beast, revealing a world built on glass, gold, and fear. It was her first day, and already, Letitia could feel it, something wasn't right. The sun was harsh, bouncing off the pristine white marble driveway in blinding flashes. The grass looked fake, unnaturally green and trimmed to military precision. It was the kind of place that screamed perfection while reeking of cold, manufactured control. But what chilled Letitia even more wasn't the grandeur, it was the silence. Too perfect, too sterile, as if joy had been vacuumed out and replaced with something else, something darker. She gripped her bag tighter, one foot in front of the other, head down. Don't speak unless spoken to. That's what the agency told her. Letitia was no stranger to wealth. She'd cleaned homes before, mansions, penthouses, luxury hotels, but nothing like this. Nothing this heavy. Even the air here seemed to carry a warning. And then she saw her. Victoria Belmont, draped in a designer robe that likely cost more than Letitia's entire annual salary. Victoria stood on the front steps like royalty inspecting her newest servant. Her blonde hair was pulled into a taut, unforgiving bun, and her icy blue eyes bore into Letitia with the precision of a blade. "You're late," Victoria snapped, though Letitia had arrived 5 minutes early. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "Don't ma'am me. Just do your job." Letitia swallowed hard. Yes, what? Yes, ma'am." A smirk curled at the edge of Victoria's lips. Like a predator satisfied with the first crack of fear, she turned on her heel and strutted back inside, leaving the door open like a challenge. Letitia stepped in. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls lined with original art, Picasso, Monet, things she'd only seen in books, but none of it felt beautiful. It felt cold. Like everything in this house was curated for show, not for living. Victoria turned to her abruptly. "Here are the rules." Letitia stood still, attentive. "You're not to enter my bedroom, ever. You clean the kitchen, the floors, the bathrooms. You stay out of my business. You don't speak to my son unless I give you permission. If I find out you've taught him anything, even a single word, you're gone. Immediately. Understood?" Letitia blinked. "Your son?" Victoria's tone dropped to a near growl. "He's autistic, nonverbal. Don't waste your time trying. He's broken." Letitia felt her stomach twist. "But every now and then," Victoria added, sipping from a champagne flute that had materialized in her hand, "he needs help with the basics. Feeding, bathing. If he bites you, don't take it personally." There was no emotion in her voice, not even indifference, just a hollow, callous efficiency. Letitia nodded slowly. "Understood." Victoria leaned in close then, her voice a low hiss. "You're nothing here, understand? Nothing but a pair of hands. Don't get any ideas about playing mommy. I've fired 3 of your kind already." Letitia's jaw tightened. "My kind?" Victoria straightened. "Oh, don't play coy. You know exactly what I mean." Letitia stood frozen as Victoria turned and sauntered up the staircase, her heels tapping out a rhythm of contempt. The house fell silent again. Letitia exhaled. She hadn't even met the boy yet, but she already felt like she was walking on shattered glass. And somehow, deep in her gut, she knew this wasn't just a job. It was something more dangerous, something explosive. And it had only just begun. The door creaked open with a hesitant moan. Room 209, the only one on the second floor without art hanging on the walls. Letitia stood in the doorway, unsure whether to knock or simply enter. Victoria hadn't given her any instructions today. But the schedule, if you could call the crumpled paper taped to the fridge a schedule, said that the boy needed assistance with lunch. She stepped in. The air inside was different, thick, almost humid. It smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner, with something else beneath it, something human. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the afternoon sun. The room felt like a cell. And there, in the far corner, sat a small boy with curly brown hair, rocking gently back and forth on a beanbag. He looked no older than 8. His hands fluttered near his face in soft, rhythmic motions. His eyes, large and impossibly sad, were locked on the window, even though the blinds covered the view. Letitia froze. So this was him. Nathan. The boy Victoria called broken, but he didn't look broken. He looked forgotten, like a page no one had bothered to read. She approached slowly, crouching to his level. "Hi," she whispered. No response, not even a glance. She tried again. "Nathan?" Still nothing. She exhaled softly. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Her voice was gentle, melodic. the same tone she used with her younger brother back home when he'd wake up from nightmares. She reached into her apron and pulled out a small apple, sliced and arranged in a napkin. "Would you like some?" Nathan blinked once, then, slowly, cautiously, his gaze drifted to the apple slices. She laid them down on the little table beside him and stepped back. To her quiet amazement, Nathan reached out, picked up a piece, and nibbled. His chewing was slow, almost mechanical, but deliberate. There was no sign of fear, just curiosity. "Good," she smiled. "That's apple, in Spanish." "Manzana. Can you say it?" "Manzana." No reaction. But his chewing paused for a split second. She leaned in just a little. "Manzana." Nathan resumed eating, silent again, but she saw it, just a flicker in his eye, a flash of recognition. He had heard her, understood her. And that's when the idea took root. A dangerous idea. A hopeful one. Over the next few days, Letitia began testing little words, colors, numbers, animals, always quietly, always when Victoria was out on a call or locked away in her studio, barking at assistants on Zoom. And Nathan responded. Not with words, yet, but with signs, glances. Once, he even tapped her arm and pointed at a book. It was a Spanish picture dictionary she had snuck into the house inside her cleaning tote. She started bringing more. French, Italian, Swahili. Simple things. Bonjour, rojo, gato, danki. And he listened. He listened like someone starving for sound, starving for meaning, starving for connection. But they were never alone for long. Every moment of peace was hunted by the ghost of Victoria Belmont. And one evening, that ghost walked in, without warning. The close call. It was late. The lights in the house had dimmed. Letitia sat beside Nathan with a laminated alphabet chart, whispering phonics to him in German. Then the doorknob rattled. Letitia's heart seized. She snatched the chart, slid it under her apron, and stood up just as Victoria stormed in. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Letitia straightened her back. He needed help finishing his dinner. Victoria's eyes narrowed at the plate, still full. "And you thought a bedtime story would help?" Letitia smiled, masking the trimmer in her hands. Sometimes voices calm him. Victoria looked from the untouched food to the woman standing beside it. She stepped closer to Nathan and snapped her fingers. "Say something. Go on. Speak." Nathan flinched, covering his ears. "Exactly." Victoria spat. "Useless. Just like the rest of you think he's not." Letitia fought the urge to speak, to shout, but she held her breath. Victoria walked out without another word. And Letitia sank to the floor as soon as the door clicked shut behind her. She knew now, she was walking a tightrope with no safety net. One misstep, one word overheard, and it was over. But what choice did she have? This boy was learning, growing, awake. And she would not let that light be smothered by a mother too blind to see it, even if it meant losing everything. Let's take a short pause. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you or someone you know has ever experienced anything like this. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Now, we continue. It was a Monday, the kind of gray, silent day that made the house feel like a museum of sadness. Rain tapped against the tall windows like impatient fingers. Outside, the sky hung low and bloated, pregnant with another storm. But inside, the real lightning was about to strike. Letitia hadn't planned to teach today. Victoria had canceled her usual tennis appointment and was home all morning, stalking the corridors of her glass palace like a restless lioness. The staff, what little there was, walked on eggshells, avoiding her gaze. Even the cook faked a cough to leave early. Letitia was left alone with Nathan. She should have played it safe. She should have cleaned the guest bathroom for the third time that day. But when she peeked into his room and saw him tracing letters in the fogged-up window with his finger, her heart made a decision her brain didn't have time to stop. "Españolo, Francis?" she whispered as she stepped inside. Nathan turned, his eyes lighting up in recognition. He held up 3 fingers. "German?" He nodded, a small flicker of a smile dancing at the corner of his lips. Letitia knelt beside him and opened the weathered German children's book she had hidden inside the folds of her laundry cart. "Today," she said gently, "we learn Regen. That means rain. Like today." She pointed to the gray sky outside. "Regen. Ray," Nathan whispered. Letitia's breath caught. "Jen," he finished. Tears stung her eyes. It was the first time he'd spoken, a real word, with intent, with understanding. "You did it," she whispered, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Nathan, you spoke." She hugged him, A brief, instinctual embrace. And that was the moment it all fell apart. Because she hadn't heard the door. Victoria stood there. Her expression was stone. The kind of stillness that only exists before devastation. Letitia turned slowly, still holding the book, still half on her knees. Victoria's eyes dropped to the German alphabet pages, then to Nathan, then to the space between them. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like a promise of cruelty. Get out. Letitia stood up quickly. Mrs. Belmont, I said get out, now. Nathan whimpered and scrambled backward toward the corner, his earlier triumph shrinking into fear. His small hands shook as he covered his ears. Letitia took a step forward. He spoke. He said, I don't care what you think he said. He's not here to be your little project. Victoria snatched the book from Letitia's hands and ripped it clean in half, throwing the shredded pages to the floor like trash. You crossed the line. Letitia's voice rose, trembling but firm. He's not broken. He just needs. I told you, Victoria hissed, stepping forward until they were nearly nose to nose. I don't pay you to think. I don't pay you to teach. I pay you to clean. Do you understand me? You arrogant little. She stopped short, breathing hard. Her eyes narrowed. You're fired. The words came like a gunshot, sharp, final. Letitia froze. What? Out of my house, now, or I call the police and say you assaulted my son. Letitia's jaw dropped. You'd lie like that? Victoria smirked. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? You forget where you are. Sweetheart, you're a maid in a billionaire's home. Your word means nothing. Letitia stood in stunned silence. Then she turned to Nathan. He was rocking again, muttering something to himself. Regen, Regan. Her heart shattered. She turned back to Victoria, fire in her eyes. You can fire me, threaten me, but that boy, he spoke, and you'll never erase that. Victoria rolled her eyes and pressed the intercom. Security to the second floor. Letitia didn't wait. She picked up her bag, walked past the broken pages on the floor, and out of that gilded cage. But she wasn't leaving defeated. She was leaving with purpose. Because now she knew exactly what kind of evil she was up against. And she wasn't going to stay silent. Not anymore. The Belmont mansion stood tall, beautiful, and dead quiet. Too quiet. It had been 3 days since Letitia was removed. 3 days since Victoria slammed the doors on what she called a stain on the household. 3 days since the German children's book was torn in half and tossed in the fireplace like an act of symbolic cleansing. But the silence in that house wasn't peace. It was rot. It crept along the marble floors, clung to the glass walls, and choked the air in Nathan's room like a fog no one could clear. And for all Victoria's attempts to reset the order, to erase Letitia's presence like a smudge on her designer mirror, something had already changed. And it wouldn't be undone. Nathan refused to eat. Not even apples, his favorite. He lay curled on the floor, not on the bed. He never used the bed anymore and stared at the ceiling like it might speak to him. He didn't rock. He didn't hum. He didn't mutter. He was just still. Victoria noticed. Of course she did. And she hated it. She stormed in and out of his room with new therapists, cold men in suits, robotic women with clipboards. They spoke in cold, analytical tones, using words like regression, uncooperative, isolated behavior. None of them asked what had changed. None of them cared to look deeper. They weren't there to understand Nathan. They were there to confirm Victoria's version of him. You're doing this for attention, Victoria snapped one afternoon, arms crossed as she loomed over her son's motionless form. That woman poisoned your brain, but she's gone now, and you need to forget her. Nathan didn't move. She stepped closer. I said forget her. She was a maid. A maid. Nathan, not your teacher, not your friend. And then, as if to hammer in her superiority, she reached down and roughly grabbed his chin. Look at me when I'm speaking. Nathan's hand shot up, not to hit her, but to block, to protect himself. The movement shocked her. For the first time, he had resisted her. He was always passive, always obedient in his silence, but this was different. It wasn't defiance. It was fear. She dropped his face like it had burned her and backed away. That night, Victoria sat alone in her grand study, a glass of something expensive and aged in one hand, her other scrolling endlessly through her phone. That's when she saw it. A post. Simple. Quiet. But loud enough. The post that shattered the illusion. On a modest Facebook page, run by a local community center for immigrant families, Letitia had written a short message. He said his first word. It wasn't in English. It wasn't even to me, it was to the rain. But it was real, and they didn't want the world to know. There was no name, no details. But the comments poured in. People knew. They recognized the mansion, the boy, the woman who fired staff for speaking Spanish in the hallways, the same woman who made headlines last year for donating $500,000 to elite autism research and using her son's name for clout. And just like that, the cracks began to show. Whispers turned to rumors. A former gardener replied, "She fired me for saying Buenos dias." A nanny posted anonymously, "She never let me read to him. She said his brain didn't need fantasy nonsense." Then came the kitchen assistant. She called him a pet, said he didn't need love, just obedience. One by one, the mask slipped. And by the end of the week, the whispers had reached exactly the kind of ears Victoria dreaded most. Not the media, but the donors, the board members, the investors, the threat to the empire. Victoria's name wasn't just a name. It was a brand. She sat on boards, owned art galleries, gave speeches on neurodivergence at elite conferences, always ending with carefully rehearsed stories about her brave little boy who taught her the meaning of patience. But when whispers become scandal, and scandal begins to stain capital, suddenly, patience runs out. Her assistant delivered the first blow. "We received 3 cancellations from this quarter's gala sponsors, and a request for your removal from the education panel in Zurich." Victoria's grip on her glass tightened. She waved the assistant off. She could handle this. She had handled worse. But deep down, she felt it, a flicker of something she hadn't known in years. Panic. And still, Nathan would not speak again. No amount of new therapists. No expensive programs. No bribes of toys, iPads, horses, or trips to the south of France. He simply waited. For someone who was no longer there. It started with a knock. Not the trembling kind of knock that begged for permission, but the kind that announced itself with quiet certainty. A knock that didn't ask to be heard, it expected to be. Victoria glanced up from her desk, still dressed in crisp white as if to camouflage herself in the illusion of control. The chaos of the past week had been carefully kept out of her house, locked behind screens and public relations statements. Her team told her it would blow over. Her lawyer said there was no case. Her assistant filtered the calls. She still had power. She believed she had power. But then came the knock. And when she opened the door, the air shifted. Letitia stood there, not in uniform, not holding a mop or laundry basket, but in a dark blazer, her curls pinned back, her stance tall, composed, and unshakable. Beside her stood a man in a navy blue suit, glasses perched on his nose, a calm but focused look in his eyes. A civil rights attorney, not just anyone, the same man who had sued a senator last year and won. Behind them, 3 news vans waited discreetly at the gates, their cameras already turning. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria felt exposed. "May I come in?" Letitia asked, her voice cool, even. "You have no right to be here." Victoria spat, trying to close the door, but the man's foot was already in the gap, and his badge appeared before her face like a final verdict. "We're here to inform you that multiple complaints have been filed against you, allegations of verbal abuse, racial discrimination, child endangerment, and unlawful termination. We've also filed an emergency petition to the court. You may want to speak to your attorney." "I have spoken to my attorney," Victoria hissed, her voice cracking now, "and I know my rights." "And so do we," the man said. "More importantly, so does Nathan." At the sound of his name, a soft thud echoed down the marble hallway. A moment later, a small head peeked around the corner, pale, thinner than he'd been just weeks before. But those eyes, those searching, silent eyes, widened when they landed on Letitia. She smiled, gently, and took a step forward. "Nathan." The boy stepped out from behind the wall, barefoot, hesitant, like an animal emerging from a cage it had learned to fear. "Do you remember me?" Letitia whispered, crouching down. His lips parted, a faint sound escaped, breath, then voice, then the shadow of a word. "Regan." Tears blurred Letitia's vision as she nodded. "Yes, Regan, the rain." Victoria surged forward. "Get away from him. You can't talk to him. This is my house. This is his house." Letitia interrupted sharply, her voice now unshakable. "You only built it. He's the one who lives in it." Victoria's mouth twisted. Rage and panic and disbelief roared behind her eyes. "You think this little performance is going to change anything? You think they'll believe a cleaning lady and a mute boy over me?" Nathan stepped forward. "I'm not mute," he said. the words fragile, as if built from glass. Letitia gasped. Victoria staggered back a step. He was speaking. Each syllable was slow, deliberate, but no one in that room would ever forget the sound of it. I just didn't want to, with you. And in that moment, something inside Victoria broke. Something deeper than pride. Something rooted in her identity, her control, her polished facade. It cracked wide open, and there was nothing behind it. No love. No mother. Just a shell with money. Letitia stood, placing a hand gently on Nathan's shoulder. I didn't come back to work for you, she said. I came back to protect him. Victoria said nothing. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stood frozen in the doorway of her empire, watching it burn one word at a time. The attorney nodded and handed over the official documents. They would proceed with the investigation. Witnesses had come forward, former staff, educators, even donors ready to testify that Victoria used her son as a prop and punished him for being human. The mansion would not fall in a day, but its foundations were already cracked. Letitia took Nathan's hand. Come on, she said softly, let's go learn a new word. As they walked away, Nathan looked up at the sky. Clouds had gathered, and just as they stepped outside, the first drop of rain touched his skin. He smiled. Reagan. Letitia laughed, through tears. And for the first time in his short, silenced life, Nathan walked into the world with someone who saw him, not as a problem to fix or a burden to hide, but as a soul ready to speak. And this time, no one would shut him up again. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and if this story touched you. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories that deserve to be heard.